The silence that hung in the air was deafening. It wasn't the peaceful kind, it was the kind that comes when everything familiar has been destroyed. In the heart of what was once a bustling city stadium, 30 survivors stood where touchdowns used to be celebrated. Now, the field was caked with ash, dried blood, and the metallic stench of death. The Endzone, once a symbol of victory, had become the last line between life and the undead. Elena wiped the sweat from her brow, clutching a rusted crowbar in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. "North gate secure," she said quietly into the device. "Minimal activity, for now." On the other end, Malik responded, "Copy that. South wall is still holding. No breaches. But we spotted movement in the subway tunnel again." That subway tunnel had been a problem since day 47. The infected seemed drawn to the echoes beneath the city, sound, perhaps, or memory. Either way, it was a weakness they couldn't afford. There had been thousands once. People trying to escape, desperate to reach military convoys. But when the last evacuation copter was torn from the sky right above the stadium, the government stopped responding. The final broadcast was a shaky message from a bleeding soldier: "If you're still alive, hold your ground. Fortify. Help is coming." That was 19 days ago. Now only 30 remained: firefighters, former athletes, 2 teenagers, a nurse, and people who, by all rights, should not have made it this far. Survivors not because of strength or skill, but because they refused to die. The stadium had been turned into a fortress. Steel beams ripped from collapsed buildings formed makeshift barricades. Floodlights scavenged from abandoned trucks lit up the perimeter. The press box was now their command center. But morale was cracking. Supplies were thin. Ammunition, thinner. And worst of all, the zombies were evolving. No longer aimless wanderers, they hunted in groups. Coordinated. Quiet. Until it was too late. Elena climbed the stairs up to the press box, where Jacob, the former stadium manager turned reluctant strategist, was hunched over a map. "They're testing us," she said, not bothering with a greeting. He didn't look up. "I know. Yesterday they circled the west wall. Today, the tunnels. They're pushing for a soft spot." She pointed to a cluster of red markers on the map. "Here. That entrance behind the scoreboard, why haven't we sealed it?" Jacob sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because we lost the welding torch in the fire. It's open. Then we're already dead." A loud bang echoed from the stadium's outer gates. Instantly, every person within the end zone went on alert. Floodlights flickered on. Spotters climbed the bleachers with binoculars. Gun barrels emerged from cracks in the barricades. And then, nothing. Just a fallen trash bin, rolling in the wind. "False alarm," someone called. But the tension remained. Down on the field, 2 brothers, Leo and Marcus, argued near the garden beds where they grew potatoes and beans. The soil barely supported life, but it was all they had. Marcus believed they should ration more strictly. Leo insisted people needed hope, even if it came in the form of a full stomach. Hope had become rare. So rare, people clung to it like a weapon. Inside the medical tent, 12-year-old May sat beside her father's cot. He'd been bitten a week ago. They had cut off his arm to stop the spread. It had worked, for now. But he hadn't woken up in 2 days. She held his hand like it could keep him tethered to the world. And then, just after midnight, the real test came. It started with a sound, too light for a growl, too rhythmic for the wind. A scrape. A shuffle. A groan. One of the southern spotters, Dana, peered into the darkness beyond the walls. Her blood ran cold. "They're here," she whispered into the radio. "South side. A lot of them." Lights turned. Guns cocked. Adrenaline surged. But what they saw next was worse than any previous attack. It wasn't a horde. It was a formation. Zombies moved slowly but with purpose, 5 wide, 2 deep, pushing a rusted car toward the wall. A battering ram. Jacob's voice echoed over the comms, positions. No warning shots. This is not a drill. The survivors rushed into place, barely believing what they saw. 30 souls. 1 ruined stadium. No escape. But they didn't scream. They didn't run. Because in the Endzone, fear was a luxury. They had one job now: turn ruins into resistance. The southern barricade shook like it was breathing. 30 survivors had fought dozens of zombie attacks before, but this time, it was different. The undead weren't just charging blindly, they were coordinated, moving the rusted car like a siege weapon, ramming it into the steel-reinforced wall that separated the living from the endless. Jacob barked through the radio, "Target the legs. Bring the front line down." Gunfire lit the night. The sharp cracks of rifles echoed through the empty stadium, mingled with the growls of the dead. Elena crouched behind a sandbag pile, picking off targets methodically. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She was ex-military, trained for chaos, but nothing in her past prepared her for enemies who felt no fear, no pain. The car slammed into the wall again. Metal screamed. Bolts loosened. Above, Dana shouted, "They're trying to wedge under the panel. They're lifting it." A group of infected, bloated, hunched things with split jaws had gotten hold of the lower portion of the barricade, rocking it back and forth like animals learning a new trick. Inside the Endzone, the survivors scrambled. Leo ran toward the breach site, dragging 2 heavy crates behind him. "More weight," he shouted. "Stack it before they get through." Malik joined him, gripping a hammer. "We don't have time to weld, we jam it old school." As they reinforced the barricade, a sickening groan filled the air. The top portion of the wall buckled inward just a few inches, but enough to feel like a death sentence. Then, silence. The infected stopped. The ramming ceased. A moment passed. 2. 3. "What are they doing?" Elena asked under her breath. From the shadows outside, a different figure emerged. Taller. Cleaner. Moving with purpose. The creature wasn't just undead. It was controlled. Its head tilted slowly, scanning the defenses. A gaping wound revealed part of its skull, but its eyes, milky, yet focused, locked onto Elena's tower. She stared back, frozen. The thing raised a hand. Not in greeting, but in command. The horde resumed. This wasn't evolution. This was leadership. New type spotted. Elena shouted. "Mark the target. South quadrant, Sector D." But before anyone could aim, the leader retreated into the mist. The horde surged forward. Boom. The car slammed again. This time, the bottom of the wall cracked, bolts giving way. "Breaching!" Malik yelled. "Get the inner barrier ready." They'd built a second line of defense inside, old bleachers, sandbags, fencing, but it was meant to buy time, not survive a siege. "Pull back to the second line," Jacob ordered. "Leave the outer wall if it fails, we're not dying over steel." As survivors retreated, Leo stayed back, lobbing homemade Molotovs over the barricade. Flames erupted, igniting 3 of the undead. But they didn't scream. They kept coming, walking through fire as if it were nothing more than wind. Elena took one last shot before falling back, catching an infected clean in the temple. The corpse dropped, but 5 more took its place. May, the 12-year-old, had been ushered to the dugout, now used as a shelter. Her father still hadn't woken up. She clutched a flashlight like it could protect her, listening to the chaos above. Inside the command post, Jacob flipped a switch, powering up the internal speakers. "Everyone listen," his voice boomed across the stadium. "We're not going down tonight. You've trained. You've built. This is our ground. Let them come. We hold the Endzone, or we die trying." As the first infected poured through the collapsing wall, the survivors launched their counterattack. Leo and Malik led the charge at the breach point, swinging bats and pipes like warriors from a forgotten age. Behind them, Dana fired from above with precision, thinning the front line. Marcus launched a flare to light the battlefield in red, bathing the stadium in a fiery glow. But even as they fought, something was clear. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about strategy. The undead were testing them like a general scouts for weakness. And somewhere out there, that tall zombie, the one with eyes too human to ignore, was watching. Planning. Inside the dugout, May whispered to her unconscious father, "Please wake up, we need you." Outside, another section of wall groaned. More coming. But the Endzone didn't break. Not yet. Dawn crept in without promise. A gray sky hung low over the shattered stadium, casting everything in pale, miserable light. Smoke from the night's fire still curled above the breached wall, and the air smelled of burnt flesh and gasoline. The Endzone had survived the attack, but only barely. Elena stood near the southern wall, hands clenched around her crowbar, eyes locked on the remains of the battlefield. The rusted car used as a battering ram lay twisted and smoldering, surrounded by scorched corpses that hadn't moved since midnight. No new sounds. No movement. Too quiet. Malik walked up behind her, rubbing a bruised shoulder. They should have pushed harder. They had the numbers. They weren't trying to break through, Elena murmured. They were watching. Testing our response. That leader, the tall one, it backed off before the breach even started. Malik frowned. Zombies don't retreat. They swarm. Exactly. They both looked over the damaged wall. Something about it felt staged, like a stress test, not an actual attempt to overwhelm. In the command post, Jacob was already awake, surrounded by makeshift blueprints and a half-empty thermos of cold coffee. His eyes were bloodshot. The night hadn't given him sleep, only more questions. Dana entered, limping slightly. "We lost 4 spotlights. Ammo's down to 30%. Leo's got a busted rib. And Marcus is threatening to leave if we don't find more food." Jacob nodded. "We have a decision to make, either rebuild what we've lost or adapt for what's coming next." Dana raised an eyebrow. "And what is coming next?" He tapped the map. "I think we're being herded. Every time we strengthen one side, they hit another. They're not trying to kill us fast. They're trying to bleed us out. Like a siege?" Jacob nodded slowly. "But worse. A siege assumes your enemy waits outside. Ours might already be in." Back at the dugout, May sat by her father's cot. He was still unconscious, but his breathing had changed, shallower now. The nurse, Angela, crouched beside her with a damp cloth. "He's fading," she said gently. "We don't know how much longer he has. But if he turns, you have to step back. Promise me." May didn't answer. She just held her father's hand tighter. In the center field, Leo and Marcus argued again. This time, it was louder. "I'm not letting anyone starve," Leo shouted. "We need morale, or we lose everything. And if we run out in a week? Then what?" Marcus threw a half-empty can of beans at the wall. "We die with full stomachs." Elena stepped between them. "Enough. If you're going to waste energy fighting, do it outside the walls. Right now, we need to patch this breach and reinforce the tunnel exits." Marcus backed away, glaring. Just don't expect me to go down with your blind optimism. Leo exhaled, wiping his face with the back of his hand. We're falling apart. No, Elena said quietly. We're being pushed apart. She didn't say it out loud, but she had a theory. That zombie leader wasn't just trying to kill them, it was trying to break them. Emotionally. Psychologically. And it was working. By afternoon, the survivors split into 2 teams, one for repairs, one for scavenging. Malik led the second team into the lower levels of the stadium to search the old locker rooms, medical offices, and utility tunnels. It had been weeks since anyone went down there. As the group moved deeper, the air grew damp. Mold clung to the concrete. The flickering flashlight revealed graffiti, shattered tiles, and once-forgotten memories of cheers and roaring fans. Keep your eyes open, Malik whispered. If anything feels wrong, say something. They passed through the old weight room, then into a corridor leading to the auxiliary power room. As they stepped closer, Dana raised a hand. Wait. Everyone froze. From the far end of the corridor came a low hum. Not a growl. Not a moan. A mechanical buzz. They inched forward, slowly. The door to the power room was ajar. Inside, flickering lights revealed wires spliced together, recently. A portable battery had been connected to what looked like an old signal transmitter. What the hell? Malik whispered. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from behind them. The group turned sharply, but no one was there. Malik motioned for them to backtrack. Now. Quiet. They made it 3 steps before the scream came. Not from a zombie. From one of their own. Angela, who had stayed near the door, was gone. Dana turned her flashlight toward the ceiling. There, clinging upside down to an exposed pipe, was a twisted, pale figure with gnarled limbs and red glowing eyes. It dropped. And then the corridor erupted in screams. Screams tore through the tunnel like a blade slicing silence. The echo made it worse, distorted, overlapping, almost inhuman. Malik spun and raised his flashlight just in time to catch a glimpse of the creature that had dropped from the ceiling. It wasn't like the others. Its body was longer, limbs bent the wrong way, and its eyes glowed faintly red in the dark. Dana raised her rifle and fired. The bullet struck the thing in the chest, dead center. It barely flinched. Angela's scream cut off. Blood splattered across the floor. The creature had dragged her into a dark crawlspace before anyone could react. Fall back. Malik yelled. Back to the upper corridor. The scavenger team turned and ran, boots slapping against concrete, lungs burning with fear. Behind them, the sound of scraping claws followed, fast, deliberate. Not a mindless stumble. A hunt. They barely made it to the stairwell when the thing lunged again, this time catching Malik's jacket. He spun and slammed his flashlight into its face. For a split second, the creature recoiled, hissing like an animal caught in sudden light. Dana helped drag Malik up the stairs. They slammed the door shut, locking it behind them. Silence returned, but it was a silence full of breath and panic. What was that? Dana asked, panting. Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. Back in the stadium, Jacob watched from the press box as the group emerged, one short. He knew before they spoke. His face tightened, jaw clenched. No more tunnel runs, he ordered. I don't care what supplies are down there. Elena met Malik halfway across the field. What happened? There's something else down there, he said, voice hoarse. Fast. Strong. It was setting traps. And it was using the lights. That stopped her cold. What? Dana nodded. There was a transmitter. Someone's been powering it. Rewiring the circuits. Jacob arrived, frowning. You're saying something, is using electricity? Not just that, Dana said. The creature, it didn't attack like a zombie. It hunted. And it reacted to light, like it understood it could be exposed. Jacob rubbed his forehead, frustration setting in. We've been treating this like a siege. But what if we're not the only ones inside? That night, no one slept. They doubled the guards. The floodlights, what remained of them, were set to full power. Elena ordered the northern gates welded shut. She didn't care if they trapped themselves. Better trapped with a plan than exposed to the unknown. In the dugout, May checked her father's pulse again. Weak. Barely there. Angela was gone. The only medic left now was Jacob, who had once studied paramedics in college but never finished training. He tried to show May how to give fluids using an 4-tube they salvaged from the lower medical room. The girl didn't say much. But her eyes had aged. No child should look that cold. Later that evening, Leo took to the bleachers and began sketching reinforcement plans using chalk on wood. He couldn't sit still, not after losing another member. Not after seeing fear in Malik's eyes for the first time. Marcus sat beside him. No argument this time. Think anyone's coming for us? Marcus asked quietly. Leo didn't answer. He just kept sketching. Elena entered the press box with something in her hands, pieces of the transmitter Malik's team recovered. Look at this, she said, dropping them on the table in front of Jacob. He squinted. Radio wiring? Modified. The signal was bouncing. Repeating. Not a call for help. A beacon. Jacob stared at the pieces. Who would send a beacon from a zombie zone? Not who, Elena said. What if it's the zombies themselves? That's insane. Is it? She countered. They're organizing. Strategizing. What if they're calling others? The implications were chilling. A few hours later, as the group tried to rest, Malik sat alone near the southern barricade, staring at the dark beyond. He didn't believe in monsters, not before tonight. Now he wasn't sure. He heard a faint noise. Click. 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 Not a moan. Not a groan. A sound like metal tapping concrete. He raised his weapon, shining his flashlight. Nothing. But as he turned to head back, he noticed something at the edge of the wall, scratched into the concrete, barely visible. We see you. His breath caught. Not painted. Not burned. Scratched. Fresh. He stumbled back, heart racing. The next morning, Elena found him pale and silent. When she asked what he saw, Malik just pointed to the scratch. They were no longer just defending against the dead. They were playing a game with something that could think. And the Endzone? It wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a labyrinth. And something in the dark knew every turn. Rain fell hard the next morning, an angry downpour that drenched the stadium and turned the cracked concrete into slick danger. Most of the survivors huddled beneath plastic tarps and old vendor stalls, trying to stay dry. But there was no comfort. Not anymore. They all felt it. The Endzone was no longer just under siege from the outside. Something had wormed its way in, something smarter, colder, and it was watching. Jacob stood at the center of the field, soaked to the bone, staring at the southern wall where Malik had found the scratched words, "We see you." "I've seen soldiers snap under pressure," Jacob whispered, more to himself than anyone nearby. "But Malik's not broken. Not yet." Elena joined him, gripping a soaked map in one hand and her crowbar in the other. Whatever did that wasn't trying to break in. It wanted us to see it. "And now we're being hunted like rats in a maze," Jacob said grimly. Inside the press box, Dana and Marcus examined the broken transmitter they'd recovered from the tunnel. Marcus, a former electrician before the outbreak, had been piecing it apart all night. "There's a pattern," Marcus said, pointing to the blinking light that still pulsed faintly. "Coordinates?" Dana asked. "Worse. It's broadcasting a signal code, over and over. Not words. Just sound. Rhythmic. Repetitive. Like sonar." Dana's stomach twisted. "Are we being tracked?" Marcus nodded. "Like a beacon. Anyone or anything tuned to this frequency knows exactly where we are." Without hesitation, Dana yanked the wire from the battery. The blinking stopped. But the silence that followed was deafening. That afternoon, Leo and Elena gathered the remaining survivors in the center field. 27 remained. 3 lost since the last count. "We're not waiting anymore," Elena declared. "No more hoping someone finds us. No more hiding. If they want war, we give it to them." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Fear. Doubt. And, under it all, a spark of something else. Hope. Jacob stepped forward, holding up the stadium's crude blueprints. "We turn this place from a cage into a trap. Controlled entrances. Kill zones. Fire lanes. We dig spike trenches near the main wall. We move supplies to the upper levels. If they want to break us, they'll bleed for it. And if that thing comes back?" Malik asked, his voice quiet but sharp. Jacob's eyes were hard. "Then we kill it. Or die trying." Work began immediately. Within hours, the stadium rang with noise, hammering, dragging, welding. Survivors who had once been accountants, teachers, students, were now builders of war. They dragged scrap metal into barriers, tore apart benches for wood, and filled oil drums with broken glass and nails. By nightfall, a small command post had been fortified at the announcer's booth. From here, Elena and Dana had a clear view of the field, the walls, and the enemy's favorite breach points. But something strange happened as darkness settled in. The zombies didn't come. No growling. No movement. Not even the sound of distant shuffling. Only the rain. That silence made everyone more nervous than any horde ever had. May sat alone in the dugout, her father still unconscious beside her. The little girl hadn't spoken all day. Not until Leo sat near her with 2 crackers and a bottle of water. "He's still breathing," Leo said softly. May nodded. "He moved his hand earlier." "Good. That means he's still fighting." May looked up at him, her voice like a whisper. "Do you think the monsters can talk to each other?" Leo hesitated. "I think they listen," he finally said. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She walked the perimeter, checking every barricade. Every shadow made her grip her crowbar tighter. Then she heard it. Whispers. Faint. Slithering under the bleachers. Too soft to understand, but rhythmic. Repeating. She knelt down, shining her flashlight between the gaps. Nothing. Until a shape darted past. Too small for a zombie. Too fast. She yanked back and called for backup. Jacob, Dana, and Marcus came running. "What did you see?" Jacob asked. Elena's face was pale. "I think there's more than just one." Suddenly, the floodlights flickered. Then went dark. A scream rang out from the north gate. Followed by another. And another. The Endzone, once a fortress, was now a trap. And the creatures had just sprung it. Screams tore across the Endzone like a jagged blade, slicing through the pitch-black stadium. The floodlights had failed all at once, every bulb popping in perfect sequence, as if planned. Chaos exploded. Elena sprinted toward the north gate, crowbar in one hand, flashlight in the other. The beam shook violently in her grip. Shadows danced and bent in impossible ways. She passed overturned chairs, scattered supplies, and blood splashes that hadn't been there minutes ago. Jacob. Dana. Report, she yelled into the radio. Static. Then. Gate, breach, north tunnel, ambush, crack. The signal cut off. On the upper deck, Malik held position with a scoped rifle. The moon broke through the clouds just enough to reveal movement in the field, shadows shifting unnaturally, not stumbling like typical undead. They were coordinated. He squeezed the trigger and dropped one. Its body collapsed, but no moan, no groan. Just a thud. Silent. Eerie. In the tunnel, Dana and Marcus were cornered. The emergency light flickered behind them, barely illuminating the hallway. Dana reloaded her pistol with trembling fingers while Marcus held a sharpened pipe like a spear. "They're flanking us," Dana whispered. From behind, they heard the same sound Elena had described earlier, whispers. Not voices, but breath. Like something trying to mimic language. It sent a chill straight to their bones. Suddenly, one of the creatures leapt from the wall, not through a doorway. It had crawled along the ceiling like a spider. Dana fired. The bullet grazed its skull. It hissed and fell, limbs flailing, before scrambling away with unnatural speed. "What are they?" Marcus gasped, eyes wide. "I think they're what happens when the virus evolves," Dana answered grimly. "Or when someone trains them." Back on the field, Jacob and Leo fought to hold the center barricade. Fires burned in trash barrels. Shadows danced. Zombies, or whatever they had become, were climbing the walls. Not trying to bash them down. Climbing. "They're not here for food," Jacob muttered. "They're here to destroy our mind." Leo slammed one off the wall with a metal bat. "Well, it's working." A horn blasted from the press box, May's doing. The child had been hiding there, but now she was using the loudspeaker. "Everyone to the center. Regroup at midfield," her voice rang out. The stadium echoed with panic and footsteps. Elena reached the field as three of the creatures burst from the dugout tunnel. They moved like wolves, but worse, like they enjoyed the chase. She swung hard with her crowbar, catching one mid-lunge. Its jaw snapped sideways, but it didn't fall, it kept crawling, even while its neck hung loose like a broken hinge. Malik covered her from the deck, taking shot after shot. But even headshots weren't always stopping them now. "We need light," Elena shouted. Leo, dragging a half-broken generator toward midfield, shouted back. "Cover me." They piled furniture, barrels, and scrap metal around the center and began to form a circle. One way in. One way out. Fires lit. Weapons ready. The survivors now numbered only 22. In just 1 hour, 5 more had been lost, dragged into darkness or left screaming in unseen corridors. May sat beside her father, who stirred for the first time in days. His eyes opened slowly. "Elena," he croaked. "No," May whispered, tears falling. "It's me, Dad. You're okay. You're here." Outside their makeshift circle, the stadium grew quiet again. Jacob, bloodied and breathing hard, raised his voice. "They want us scared. They want us broken. But they made one mistake." He pointed to the center. "They trapped themselves in here with us." Elena lit a flare and raised it high. Red light bathed the survivors. And from every corner, the creatures began to circle. They weren't retreating this time. They were preparing. But the survivors stood shoulder to shoulder now. Whatever came next, they would meet it together. Red flare light flickered across the faces of the last 22 survivors. Weapons ready. Breath held. Eyes locked on the shadows moving just beyond the firelight. The creatures didn't charge. They watched. Then, something stepped forward, taller than the others, shoulders wrapped in rags and bits of torn riot gear. Its head was misshapen, skull partially exposed, but its eyes were alert. Calculating. Elena whispered, "That's not just another infected." Jacob answered, voice low, "That's a leader." The figure raised a hand, and the circling undead stopped moving. Everyone tensed. For years they'd fought moaning, mindless monsters. But this was organization. Strategy. Purpose. Suddenly, the figure stepped closer, dragging something behind it. A corpse. Angela. But her eyes, they blinked. Elena. Dana gasped. She's alive. Elena took one step forward. Angela. Angela stirred weakly, her body battered but not infected. The creature dropped her in the dirt just outside the flare's edge. And then, it spoke. Not fluent. Not clear. But the rasping words echoed across the stadium. "Stay, inside, your walls." Jacob's heart skipped. Did it just talk? Angela gasped as the creature turned and melted back into the dark. The other infected followed without a sound. Vanishing like ghosts. No attack. Just a warning. And a message, you are not alone in the food chain anymore. They pulled Angela into the circle. Her skin was cold. Her pulse thready. "I saw them, underground," she whispered. "There's more. A whole nest. A hive." "Where?" Elena asked. "Under the tunnel floor, broken elevator shaft, something's down there. Feeding them. Teaching them." Jacob looked at the others. "Then we know where this ends." For the first time in days, they had a target. And a reason to fight back. Later that night, the survivors met in the press box. Maps were laid out. A plan formed. They would take a small team and go into the tunnels, blow the shaft, collapse the hive, and cut the head off the snake. Jacob, Elena, Dana, Malik, and Leo volunteered. "I'm not letting that thing come back," Elena said. "Not to warn us. Not to toy with us." "You really think they'll stop if we take out their leader?" Leo asked. Jacob tightened the strap on his chest rig. "Maybe not. But it might slow them down. Might give others time." "Others?" Malik frowned. Jacob looked around the room. "You think we're the only ones left? You think no one's listening?" He pointed to the broken transmitter Dana had recovered. "We rebuild it. We send out a message. Not a cry for help, a warning." May stepped forward, clutching her father's hand. "If you go down there, you might not come back." Jacob nodded. "That's the idea." The descent. At dawn, the five descended into the tunnel. Back into the dark. They brought everything they had: flashlights, makeshift explosives, old radios, sharp steel, and their fear. The whispers returned almost immediately. Not in English. But not meaningless either. There was structure. Repetition. Malik led with a shotgun, eyes scanning every crack in the wall. They reached the broken elevator shaft within 20 minutes. The smell hit them first: rot, oil, and something far older. Something like rusted blood. Then came the sight. Dozens of the evolved infected were sleeping. Huddled in corners, hanging from pipes, twitching in unnatural rest. And in the center, half buried in cables and old machines, was the source. A mutated figure, fused to a wall of wires and concrete. Its veins pulsed with black liquid. Its head was massive, more brain than bone. It didn't move. But it was aware. Elena whispered, it's controlling them. Not controlling, Jacob said. Communicating. Dana planted the charges. Leo set the timer. They turned to leave. That's when the eyes opened. Dozens of them. Then, a scream. High-pitched. Not human. The horde awakened. The escape. The tunnel shook. Creatures poured from every hole. The five fought their way out, blasts echoing behind them. The timer was ticking down. Malik was bitten on the arm. He didn't stop. Leo was clawed across the back. He dragged Dana with one hand, firing with the other. Jacob threw himself between Elena and one of the fast ones, stabbed it through the chest. The team reached the last stairwell. 5. 4. 3. The explosion thundered through the tunnels, sending dust and flame up through the cracks in the stadium floor. The earth trembled. And then, silence. They emerged into the daylight, coughing and bloodied. Above them, the sun was rising. Below them, the hive was gone. For now. Smoke still curled from the cracks in the stadium floor. The blast from the tunnels had collapsed the infected hive, burying the mutated controller and halting the whispers that had haunted their nights. Above ground, the sun cast long golden rays across the blood-stained concrete. For the first time in weeks, the Endzone felt still. Not safe, but no longer hunted. Elena, Jacob, Dana, Leo, and Malik sat in silence near the central field. Their bodies were bruised. Their souls, worn thin. Malik's arm was bandaged tightly. He hadn't turned. Yet. 20 survivors remained. They'd lost Marcus in the explosion. He had stayed back an extra second to hold off the infected swarm. That 1 second bought them life. His name was now carved into the stadium wall beside the others. You think that thing down there was the last of its kind? Leo asked, staring into the smoke. No, Jacob said flatly. But it was the first of something else. Elena stood, shoulders squared. Then it's time we stopped surviving and started fighting smarter. This isn't just survival anymore. It's resistance. Behind them, May and her father worked with Dana to repair the transmitter. The old battery was almost shot, but Dana had rewired solar panels to feed a small charge through it. It buzzed with life. May typed out the message. This is the Endzone. Survivors found. Area fortified. Warning, new strain of infected observed. Intelligent. Organized. If you can hear this, you are not alone. She hit send. The signal went out. Over and over again. A call in the dark. Not a scream of fear, but a spark of defiance. 2 days later. The Endzone changed. The survivors worked in shifts to reinforce the walls. Traps were reset. Watchtowers rebuilt from old bleachers. Elena trained teams to patrol the perimeter in pairs. Every sound, every movement, was logged. The survivors were no longer waiting to be rescued. They were becoming the Stronghold. Malik recovered slowly. No signs of turning. They weren't sure if the new strain infected the same way. Or if the creature in the hive had been controlling that process. Either way, they were cautious. Dana finished installing a basic receiver to monitor other frequencies. Then, late at night, it crackled. A voice came through. This is Fort Blackstone. Reading you. Endzone, confirm location. Do you copy? Everyone froze. Jacob grabbed the mic. This is Jacob at the Endzone. We copy. We're 30 miles north of the old freeway grid. 20 survivors. Armed. Ready. The line buzzed again. Hold position. We're sending a recon drone. You'll see it at sunrise. Cheers erupted across the Endzone. For the first time in weeks, laughter returned. Hugs. Tears. Hope. They weren't alone. Sunrise. At dawn, a distant whir filled the sky. Survivors looked up to see a small recon drone circling above. A flashing green light blinked on its underbelly. It hovered over the center field, then moved toward the press box, scanning and recording. Dana waved a bright orange cloth. Elena stepped forward, face raised toward the sky. "It sees us," she whispered. Jacob nodded. "Now let's make sure what it sees is worth saving." Later that day, Leo returned from a patrol with a discovery: fresh footprints near the west wall. Not infected. Human. A small group, maybe 5, maybe 6, had passed by and vanished into the ruins nearby. "They might have seen the drone," Malik said. "Maybe they're following it too." Elena looked to Jacob. "Should we find them?" He shook his head. "Not yet. We wait. If they're survivors, they'll come. But if they're not?" Leo asked. "Then we remind them whose house this is," Jacob replied, gripping his machete. Evening. As the sun dipped low, the Endzone came alive with firelight and calm. Families shared what little food they had. Children drew maps in the dirt. The wounded rested. The whispers were gone. But the memory of them remained. Elena looked at the wall where the names were carved. So many gone. So many left. She added one more name. Not of someone who had died, but of someone who had never given up. She etched the word. Hope. Because it wasn't just a fortress they had built here, it was a symbol. That no matter how far the world had fallen, no matter how smart or twisted the enemy became, as long as humans stood together, they would never fall quietly. The Endzone would hold. And the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. End of Part 8.